webcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. And before I get started, if someone could just type into the question box the word yes if you can hear me. I just want to make sure that I'm talking to silence. I want to make sure. Oh, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone, to the de-escalation of difficult situations. Someone had asked the question, will this be recorded? And the answer is yes. You will receive notification in the next 24 hours or so with a link to a copy of this web event. Your questions, as we go through this, are encouraged. I will address all of the questions at the end simply because of the keeping this short and to the point. And this is an interactive session. I'm a trainer in real life, and when I'm in real life, I have people in the room in front of me that are giving me feedback, and that tells me where I am at any given point and time. Well, in this case, I'm pretty much talking to myself. So as we go forward, just to get a sense of who you are as a group and to get your feedback so that we can determine what areas we may spend a little more time or less, and it also gives me measurement from you as organizations for future sessions. So who's MeasureX? To those of you who are participating for the first time and looking at the list, there's some companies that I'm not familiar with. We have been working with the utility industry for the last 17 years. We've interacted with a variety of different utilities from telephone companies, power companies, municipals, across the United States. Our focus is really looking at those service and sales interactions you are having with those customers. And in our case, we use a lot of measurement to measure the current service interaction and sales interaction, and we do that by measuring what your customers' experiences are with you, by having conversations with them, and also by doing a lot of mystery shopping to measure those interactions. And as support to what we do as training for many of those organizations, we do a lot of leadership and coach training. The objective is to support training that has been provided to those companies. So in this session, we are going to look at is how to take appropriate control of a conversation with an emotional customer. We all are humans. We all have emotions. And the challenge is when we are in that emotional state, we are not always rational. Naturally, for many of you, that's a big part of the conversations you have with those customers you're serving. We want to look at how to de-escalate those emotional situations when they start to become a little escalated. And naturally, many of you in the country have experienced winters that are out of the norm, which your customers haven't seen before, which are causing you to receive more phone calls. And then naturally, summer is around the corner, and some of the areas of the United States will naturally experience more of that also. So before we get started, here is the first question to you. So I am going to put it out there, and the question is simply this. Call recording. I want to know if you have it. So if you have it and are using it on a consistent basis or just using it. So if you would, provide the little feedback there so I know where you are as companies and as a group. Okay, give you a minute to complete it. All right. It looks like total for us. So the results say that roughly 25% of you do not have it on the call. That is good for me to know. Some of you have it but are not using it. We're going to talk about that as we go forward. And some of you are just kind of sharing that in difficult customer interactions. So we're going to talk about how to use that tool more effectively as we go forward here. Thank you for your feedback on that. So, why do customers become emotional? they become emotional for a variety of different reasons. Some of them are what we'll call service issues. Didn't understand the bill, some kind of high bill complaint, or some kind of service interaction that didn't happen as far as they saw it in what was the phone call they placed in, conversation they had. And then some are the issues that you face every day with your customers that are trying to keep their service on. They don't understand the fact of when they paid their bill that they paid it too late, so now what they think is bringing them current isn't. They're delinquent, they're renegotiating because of not able to make that payment, or they are subject to disconnect in those interactions. For most of us, and if I ask each of you right now to answer the question, in the last 90 days, have you as a customer been upset in either a business you called or a business you walked into? And the answer for probably most of you is yes, you've had some kind of interaction that ticked you off, irritated you. Because for us as customers and for your customers, we all have an expectation of what should happen in that service interaction, of how we should be treated. What happens in many of those situations is when that customer is upset because their expectations weren't met, they have a tendency to get a little emotional and their voice raises. When that happens, if the representative on the other end of that phone has a tendency to raise their voice, the fight is now on. And in my case, in all the organizations I interact with, I listen to a lot of recorded phone calls from a lot of different representatives across the country. And you can hear that immediate shift, which now just creates more emotion. An important one that is missing in many of those conversations, we all as customers, we want to feel that that business values us. When you have an emotional customer in that situation, using the customer's name appropriately and respectfully in the conversation can help diffuse some of that, because one, they're not just a voice on the other end of the phone. They are somebody. It now creates more personalization to that conversation. Here's what happens for all of us. When we get emotional about whatever that situation is, our adrenaline increases, our blood pressure increases, and some of that blood starts to drain from our brain into other parts of our body. Our ability to think diminishes, and that's where we as humans enter a defensive fight or flight mode. An important one, and we'll spend a little time on this as we go through this session, is open-ended questions. Why are they important in interactions? Simply because this. We all have a left and a right brain. Our right brain activity is where all of that emotion comes from us. The left brain is that analytical part of us, that thinking part, that processing part. When we are upset, all of us wander into that emotional right brain activity. When the individual having that conversation with the emotional person is asking appropriate questions, that emotional individual in that right brain has to create a shift from right brain to left brain, which now helps to diffuse emotion because they're coming out of the emotional part of the brain into the more logical, rational part of their brain. One of my favorite ones, and I can tell you from all the companies I work with, is if I listen to 10 phone calls from pretty much any utility that I've interacted with, in those 10 phone calls, there's going to be at least one where a customer is calling in, telling their story about something, and the representative has now interrupted them at least once and possibly more times. Why? Because when we get into that defensive mode, instead of listening, we now enter defense. So we are already preparing our answer. And that is one of those things that will escalate a situation quickly when the customer is trying to tell their story. I can tell you from the calls I've listened to, I have heard each and every one of these phrases used in a conversation with a customer. Naturally, if we have an irritated, upset individual, trigger words only escalate those situations. The representatives that work at your company, every day, they are taking calls from people. Each one of those people, they have a story. They have a reason why they're calling. Something isn't working. They have a challenge with their utilities. There's a reason. The thing is your team has been taking calls every day, day in, day out, from a variety of different people, and some of those customers naturally are emotional. And the challenge is, when you've heard those stories over and over again, sometimes what I hear in the calls is the representative wasn't exactly listening to that customer. The customer has that story. They're telling it for the first time. Are we looking to make sure we are creating an active listening experience with them? Are we confirming to make sure, because words, for all of us, words mean different things to different people. And if we do not have the clarity of what that person on the other end of the phone is saying, and we make an assumption, then that can cause misunderstanding, miscommunication, and it can accelerate a situation that already might be a little emotional. Are we summarizing key parts of what's taking place in that organization, especially if we're giving a customer a variety of different pieces of information? If it's something that is new or is different to them, they may not always be grasping it. So just to create clarity of what we're trying to get across is summarizing specifics. If there's some kind of action that has to be taken in regards to this escalated customer situation, is there real clarity on what's going to happen? Do both parties know that, and has that been clearly communicated? Now, I know none of you have ever had a call where the customer was talking about their bill being too high, right? So let's look for a moment at bills, because I'm curious to see, for the makeup of the group, for what we're going to go into next, where you are in that situation. So high bill complaints. Right now, if your customers have ability to view daily usage, and click multiple ones in this, so take a moment and give me your poll response on those questions, if you would, all that apply to you. Okay, I'll give you just another second here. There's still some people voting. Okay, so let's see what poll says. So 46% of you, your customers have the ability to view daily results. 79% of you are offering some kind of energy audit, and almost all of you are doing some kind of budget billing. And interestingly enough, I'm seeing more of this, is more of you are offering prepaid service. That's excellent. So let's just talk about that, and knowing where you are. Here's what I hear in the conversations with representatives where somebody is complaining about a high bill. In most cases, the representative is immediately trying to do a little detective work in the conversation on just talking about water heater, air conditioning, a couple of those key peak users. What I hear in most of those calls is the customer doesn't quite see it the way the representative does, because naturally they do not understand power usage. To those of you who have the ability, offer the ability for your customers to view their account online, my suggestion, if the representative, now it doesn't work in every case, if the representative has the ability and the customer has online access right now, where you can easily direct them so that they can see their online usage, so that they can see on a day-to-day basis that visual impact of what happened on a given day, they have a different perception. Now, what I know from the companies I work with is in many cases, many of those customers do not know that they have that online capability. And with your new customers that you're signing up, are we making sure, one, that everyone is signed up on that service? So if you looked at the numbers now, how many of your customers have it? It becomes a simple tool to use, and I do not see that in most of the companies I interact with. And how easy is it for them to access that bill? A couple minutes of online learning so that they can do that in the future will reduce your call volume, because then they become self-sufficient in it. Energy audits. Now here's what I know. According to you, 79% of you on this call are offering that service. I have listened to thousands of phone calls, and I can tell you it is a rare occasion where any representative is offering that solution. Naturally, you can't offer it to everyone, and there's some reasons why you won't, but I do not hear that in the conversations. It's a great tool to use, and when we've got a customer who's really irate, and we're willing to go that extra step in the service to send somebody out to evaluate their situation and identify a solution, that's service. And the other part is, once that energy audit's been done and we've notated the account, next time that customer calls in with a high bill, in just asking the customer if they took the recommendations and put them to use, if the customer says no, it takes a little of that emotional energy out of the situation. And budget billing. Now, budget billing doesn't work for every customer naturally, but based on my experience, I find that most companies, there's a very small percentage of customers that are taking advantage of it. And the reason being is, in most cases, the representative that's having that conversation is not mentioning it, or they aren't explaining the benefit of that service. When that customer is looking at a $300 bill, and you could show them how they could cut that bill in half by just being more consistent monthly, and help them explain the benefit when they look at what it costs if they have to get reconnected or if they're disconnected because they can't afford it, now it becomes a solution. Not in every situation, but what I experience is that's not ever being mentioned as a solution in high bill issues. And prepay. Prepay is a great service. Those organizations that I see they're using it, they are seeing a reduce in call volume because the customer is in control of when they are going to pay. So to the 33% of you that right now on this call are using that service, here's what I'm going to present. If a customer is calling in with a high bill issue, are we making them aware that that is an option? I do not hear that mentioned in most conversations in high bill complaints. It's a great tool to use, but the customers may not be aware. Doesn't mean everyone's going to take it, but it now becomes a solution that will work in many of those cases. Are difficult customers always easy to talk with? And the answer is no, because they are in an emotional state. They are not rational in those interactions. So we want to look at is, how do we diffuse or take better control of those conversations? Two situations that come in are what are called open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. Open-ended questions are simply questions that seek to understand a customer situation or problem. The objective is simple. We're trying to see things from the point of view of that customer in order that we can create a solution to that customer's problem. Okay. When we ask questions, remember I talked about just a few minutes ago, right brain, left brain. When we're asking appropriate questions where the customer is going to, in essence, create a brief dialogue with us, if we're asking questions, they have to go from the emotional aspect of that situation to left brain, that more analytical, in order to even reply, because they have to come up with that answer. If the representative is asking questions, whether they be open-ended or closed-ended, they are in control of that conversation. And naturally, if we can move some of that emotion by the appropriate questions we're asking, we're now going to better understand, create a solution, and also be in control. Open-ended questions are simply this. If you look at those words there, what, how, when, where, why, tell me about, when you start a question with one of those words, the person can't answer yes or no. They have to provide you more information, gets them talking, gets the representative listening. Now, open-ended questions. To those of you on this call who have been in training with me, you know that open-ended questions aren't easy because it takes practice. This is one of those coaching opportunities with the people on your team, is how to create a better conversation by identifying which questions to ask to better understand, create control. And a question that you can use when you have what I will call more of a service issue. Customers unhappy because some inconvenience the company created. And research has simply shown this. When you're asking that customer for what is going to take to make the situation right for them, what the company is going to do in most situations is going to cost them less than if the company offered its own solution. Now, I can hear you right now saying, well, Dave, why don't we just, when we ask that question of our disconnect customers, they'll have a whole variety of different suggestions of what we can do. Naturally, you can't use this in every situation. But if we've got a customer that's had some kind of service inconvenience, that becomes a solution in specific cases. Closed-ended questions. Closed-ended questions are those that simply you're looking for yes or no answers. Both open-ended and closed-ended are appropriate in any conversation, okay, to keep control of that interaction. Now, do your customers ever stretch the truth? And the answer is, you bet. They want things their way. If we're going to diffuse some of that emotion and that escalation, the simplest thing is documentation. So right now, if you looked at all the customers that your company has interacted with via phone or even in person in the last week, that was some kind of escalated situation, payment, emotional issue, anything that required some kind of follow-up or ongoing conversation, is each one of those customers' accounts documented? Now, I have sat with customer service representatives. I have watched them have all sorts of conversations with their customers, and it's very seldom that I see someone actually put a note in during or at the end of that interaction. Because your customers, especially those professionals that you have, as I call them, if they aren't getting the response they want from that first person, they're going to the next one, and they'll keep making phone calls till somebody says yes. If we're going to reduce that and reduce emotional customer situations, the notes need to be clear and accurate, easy for that next person to read. When you have the notes, it's going to eliminate a lot of that de-escalation because that we have clarity of what the person said before. Working with emotional customers is a learned skill, because when they're emotional, trying to figure out how we're best going to create that interaction is not easy. For those of you that have any kind of call recording software in place, I would highly recommend that you now start reviewing emotional customer conversations. But I'm not reviewing it to point out what didn't go well. I want to review that call with him to identify how that representative could have changed that conversation around to de-escalate that situation. And those of you that have it but aren't using it, my suggestion, you have the most effective tool to help your group be more effective and also reduce that emotional, challenging customer they deal with if you start coaching them on a regular basis with those conversations. And another one, if you have call recording and on your phone system it says this call may be recorded for coaching purposes, we have that customer on the phone, we and they are having a disagreement about something that happened on a promise to pay, or the case I made the payment, or whatever, that tool becomes a very effective one if the representative were to say, hey, Mr. Saxby, let's do this. All of our calls are recorded for coaching purposes. Let me do this. I can see that you called in last Tuesday because the notes are in here on your conversation. Let's just pull that call up and replay it because maybe we did make a mistake. Now, in most cases, customer knows what happened in that previous conversation, and so you will eliminate the call volume and also some of those emotional situations. Make use of that when you need to, because if we did make a mistake, we can hear that, identify it, and now correct it and apologize. But in most cases, the customer probably was stretching the truth a little bit. They know that. End of conversation in regards to that. Now let's assume to that percentage of you that don't have call recording software. Then what I'm going to say is this. Role-playing is going to be the next best thing you can do. If we're going to help those people become more effective at handling emotional customers, that requires practice. And I don't care if they've been with you 2 months or 10 years. That practice of how to improve that conversation to better prevent it from escalating at the beginning by voice inflection and what's taking place, for all of us, there's opportunity to improve. Next best thing. Now, last thing is those abusive customers. Now, these aren't the unhappy ones for some kind of service or other related. These are people that are threatening, using foul language. Voice tone is critical because they are being abusive and that accelerates the situation. But in my case, I want to let the individual know in a very pleasant tone, tone is critical, that if they are going to continue using that kind of language in the conversation, that I am going to bring the call to an end. But I really want to help them right now, so tell me a little bit more about your problem and let's see what I can do for you. If they go back to abusive, we don't have to have any more conversation. I have clearly told them what's going to happen. I've worked in the best manner to create a solution. Conversation is over. But here's the question. What's your policy? Does every representative know that if the customer is truly abusive, that they have that capability, understanding how to handle that customer to see if they can resolve it before they disconnect the call? Okay. Last question. And that question is this. Are you considering customer service or other soft skill training in 2015? I'm just curious to those on the call kind of what your plans are for the coming year, just to see if, because I'm seeing a bigger trend in the last 18 months on organizations making that investment. So I'm curious to see for you as participating, because I'm going to start compiling these results and sharing them in future sessions. Okay, give me just a minute. Okay. Okay, it looks like about numbers, and the answer is 75% of you say yes, you are. I applaud your efforts. No matter how long your team has been doing the job they've been doing, ongoing training investment is huge. Glad to see that. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, back up one. So based on what we've covered here, just trying to stay on my time frame, and as I can see, I'm just about out. What specific questions, based on what's taken place in this last half hour, do you have? If there is one, there's that little question box down there. Type in the brief question, and I will be delighted to give you my best thoughts on that. I'll give you, say, 20 seconds or so to provide input, and if not, I have a couple questions that were actually sent to me before I started that I will bring into it. Okay, here's a question I received. I have a customer service representative that raises her voice quickly if the customer shows any emotion, any suggestions. Call coaching. I would immediately start, even in this case where it's a common thing for her, if you have call recording software in place, I am going to start listening to calls with her every week, pulling that call off, and then identifying at what point her voice inflection changed. And I want to find out what's going on for her. What is it that she's uncomfortable with? And that emotion, a lot of us don't deal with emotion well. So helping see it from her point of view and then working to coach on that. Okay, questions regarding tree trimming complaints. Okay, now, naturally that's not in your customer service area. So the question is that a contractor or is that part of our company that we're getting those complaints? So first off, there's the case of, okay, so both. So right now, I need to take a little input from the representative side to help them be more effective in dealing those questions. If those questions are not being passed to, sometimes some organizations have a Department of Forestry or someone that kind of handles those questions. If we don't have that person and I'm responsible for dealing with them, I would want to put that customer service representative out on the job for about 4 hours so that they understand why the tree trimmers do what they do, so that when they have to take those calls, they are knowledgeable and competent and confident in the answers they give. Because naturally, you trim trees because you're trying to prevent outages. The customer sees it that you just whacked down their favorite shade tree. So I need to help them understand some of the, I don't need to get into all the technical details, but help them understand why we do that, you know, how it's decreased our outages. I need to have some relevant information to give the customer a different perception. What's the why behind why we had to do what we did on their property? Okay. Last question. I've had numerous conversations with a couple people on voice tone. They don't think they are being unpleasant on the phone. This is the case. Call recording software. On a normal given day, it's Tuesday. It's the start of the day for them. They're just that warm and friendly person. I want to take one of their recorded calls, and then when they have a tendency to go south with one of the customers, I want to let them hear both of those conversations side by side so they can listen to and identify what changed between those two conversations so that they can hear it. When your team can hear it, they will be more accountable and they will own it more for future conversations. Next question. How would you suggest we address when calls mention social media concerns that have blasted your company? Boy, that's a tough question. Naturally, I need to make sure, what I know from my experience is most organizations do not always update the representatives on any kind of social media feedback. In many cases, some cases, marketing is handling that. I need to connect marketing and our customer service team, because with immediate negative feedback that comes in through social media on Facebook, one, we need to make sure marketing should be addressing that, or whoever's responsible, but we need to make sure the team is up to date on anything that may have caused it. Maybe there was an outage that just didn't get correctly communicated to the team, or whatever that is. Whoever's responsible, that information needs to be shared so that if they're going to take those kinds of calls related to it, or if they're responding, that they have accurate information depending on what the issue is. Because the same situation, customers operating from a perception on why they said what they said. We need to help them understand the why. And naturally, social media makes it easy for anyone to say anything, and they may be operating from inaccurate information. Any last questions? All right. I want to thank you all for your participation today. Have a great rest of the week. We will be doing an event in May, and you'll receive notice in advance of the focus and topic. If there's something specifically that you as an individual would like to see as a topic related to your team's interaction with customers, drop me an email, pick up the phone and call, and we will look to see what we can do to incorporate that into the future ones. Thank you very much, and have a great day.